Further remonstrances, Representative Nolan.
Mr. Speaker and colleagues, the pro-choice community and all who honor the rule of law are deeply saddened by the murder of Dr. George Tiller, as he was an integral part of our community and his loss is felt by all of us. Certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to his family and to those close to him who are suffering a personal tragedy. Dr. Tiller was the epitome of high-quality medical care, underscored by deep compassion for his patients. He provided critical reproductive health care services, including, as a small portion of his practice, abortion services for women facing some of the very most difficult medical circumstances that I can ever imagine. He was the target of harassment for much of his career. His clinic was burned down. He was shot a while ago by a health center protester, and he was recently targeted for investigation only to be acquitted by a jury just a few months ago. This past weekend, he was murdered. None of that harassment had stopped Dr. Tiller from his commitment to providing women and their families with compassionate care that others were unwilling to provide. His death is an enormous loss for the patients who relied on him, for his dedicated staff and the medical community, and for women and their families all across America, including here in Oregon. A moment of silence in his honor, please. Thank you.
Further remonstrances, Representative Barnhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night I read an item on a blog that I think is very appropriate given the remonstrance that was just given, and I'd like to read a portion of it. It's written by a patient of Dr. Tiller. Like many in this community, my heart is heavy today. There have been many great diaries that talk about Dr. Tiller's years of service to women and the threats he has endured throughout the last years of his life. My story is a bit more personal, and I want to share it with all of you to give you more insight into the man. In 1975, my mom noticed an indentation in her left breast. She called, made an appointment with her OBGYN, Dr. George Tiller. After his initial examination, he ordered a biopsy. While performing the biopsy, he immediately knew that the lump was cancerous. Instead of just closing and scheduling surgery, he grabbed a handful, his words, not mine. Her cancer doctor credited this quick thinking by Dr. Tiller with saving her life, and due to this, she didn't even have to undergo chemotherapy. Several years later, my mother and I were driving by his clinic in Wichita. Mom started complaining of chest pains, so I drove into his parking lot and ran for help. Dr. Tiller was at Mom's side immediately and stabilized her before the heart attack could cause severe damage. In 1980, I was pregnant with my first child. I had no insurance and couldn't afford a doctor's appointment until I was approved for a medical card. Mom told Dr. Tiller, and he brought me into his office where he examined me free of charge. I can credit him with the very first picture taken of my son. The last story I have to share is about my friends who could not have children. Dr. Tiller's office worked with several attorneys in the Wichita area to provide adoption services for his patients who wanted this option. My friends have a 10-year-old boy now who is loved and adored. I just wanted to get this story out to you so you could hear how this man wasn't just a tremendous fighter for women's rights. He was a brilliant physician and a kind and compassionate human being. Rest in peace, Dr. Tiller, and thank you for all you did for my friends and family. I can't give you the name of the writer because the blog is handled anonymously, but I think it's an eloquent piece by someone who knew him well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further remonstrances. Representative Van Orman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's a very sad time in the United States of America when a time-honored sanctuary becomes the citadel of murder. And I think it's time for us to reflect on the sanctity of human life and the sacredness of all of our lives, and we need to protect one another.